Welcome everyone to Rock M Nation podcast. A dour entry to the pod here. This is an episode of Dive Cuts. We are the Missouri Basketball podcast for the Rock M Radio flagship station. I am your host. If you're watching us on YouTube, please take a moment to like and subscribe. The content that we are about to talk about doesn't preclude you from liking the video, which we would appreciate. It doesn't mean that you like what's happening on the floor. So do that. Like and subscribe. I'm your host, Sam Snelling. You, if you're watching on YouTube, will probably recognize the man on your right. That is Matthew Harris. Matt, how are you?
I'm just surprised you haven't issued a mea culpa for your statements last week. I was just going to give you 5 or 10 minutes to really atone and talk to the audience about, you know, all the things you said last week that were in error, Sam. We're in error. So I'll just turn it over back to you.
Nothing was technically an error because there are always qualifiers. I feel like I was a little done in by the headline of the podcast, which
our producer,
which Levi handles, and Levi, I love you, buddy.
I saw that and said, "Oh,
be desired."
Oh, this is gonna. I'm like somebody. I was the BJ Novak gift taking notes on that.
So last week, the headline of the podcast was that Missouri is not a bad basketball team. And I want to say like Matt Watkins and I probably spent about 8 minutes on the topic of discussing like the things that were holding Missouri back from being a good basketball team.
I was going to say from being a mediocre basketball team, but
the idea was essentially like they're not a bad team. They're like 80% of a decent team. And then you and I actually kind of talked about this on the Slack channel, and I think it's relevant and something that it also kind of worth discussing, which is, you know, essentially like going into the season, I think we all kind of thought like, all right, you know, if everything goes well for Missouri, like what is the ceiling for this team? And I think we all kind of thought, well, you know, something probably similar to last year if everything goes well. And that's like, you know, same hitting the luck out of the park and you know, no injuries and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
You know, but that's also like us not getting to watch this basketball team. You don't, you know, not going to practice, you're not seeing how things are evolving. You're not seeing, you know, how the new players are integrating, and all of those things, you know. So like going into the season, we didn't really think that Anthony Robinson was going to play a role. I thought, you know, we all thought that, you know, Trent Pierce was going to be a bit more of a guy who would be able to help out, you know, kind of the back end of the rotation. So these are all things that like you don't know in early November. And so, yeah, we picked Missouri 6th, which was really, really high in the SEC. I thought that was kind of like, look, this is if everything's going to go well. Having watched them, if things went well, and Tanji and Grill are both healthy, and you know everything is as we kind of expected, I would have, if I had a chance to kind of like watch them first, I probably would have said, no, that looks like this is more like a bubble team at best. And I probably would have guessed like, you know, if they got into the tournament, it would have been like as an 11 seed.
Yeah.
And then like the injuries were just like, you know, and now we're seeing, you know, like, and I always feel bad, like kind of harping on this point because I've talked about it in 2 pieces now, you know, but like Mabor Majak playing 47.5% of the minutes at the 5 spot in a game you really needed to win. And Mabor plays with energy, but he is not the guy you want that spot. We'll just say that.
Yeah. There are lineups here that, this will be a cliche that if you had showed me some of the rotations for the last couple of weeks back in September, I would have said, yeah, they're playing on Wednesday in Nashville. I don't think there's any way you could have been really polite or sort of optimistic about that. The hard part here is I'll say this, I think most of the consensus forecasts for this team pre-injury were accurate. Most people had them between 7th and 10th, really locus, with a heavy concentration around 8th or 9th, which I thought was, a pretty fair assessment of this group and where they were. I think it was hard for us early on to get a handle for this group because they played their first 3 games without Tanji or Vanover. Well, then they got Vanover and Tanji for a little bit here and there, but realistically, you could only say that between the trip to Minnesota, after the trip to Minnesota, to the trip to Pitt, so about 6 games are about the closest, we got to seeing this team in full form. And the team that we saw, I think, at Pitt against Wichita State, and even like carrying a little bit of that momentum into Kansas, looked like a team that was going to be able to sort of steady itself. Maybe they weren't going to be an NCAA tournament team. Maybe they might, be fighting for the NIT, but they weren't going to be a bottom 14. They were probably going to be 9th or 10th. And then things have just sort of collapsed from there as we've documented on pods, as we've documented on the site, and as I said today on our Slack channel, the injury luck just took out a Mossberg pump and sawed it off and shot it into this rotation. There's just no way you can take Grill, Tanji, Pierce, or Carolero out of the mix and have anything approaching a truly competitive SEC basketball team. It just doesn't work. The minutes you have to fill and the usage that those guys filling those minutes are giving you is just not sustainable for a truly competitive basketball team, outside of, playing Arkansas, Vanderbilt, and, maybe LSU on the back end here. That's just the reality of where we're at. And so really everything since then has been, what can this team not do to really thrive, but just, as I think I told you before the pod, just keep the environment copacetic enough to where guys are playing hard and to where the environment is, good enough that you feel like you can offer your young guys quality minutes where they can develop. That is not at all what we thought we were going to be facing in the preseason, but we didn't expect injury luck to be this bad. We didn't expect, things to sort of reach this point. So I think it's important to say, I don't think, this is the worst case scenario that you could have envisioned in the preseason. And so really that's what we're navigating now. And almost like last season, it was really hard for me to take any big kind of macro lessons from last season because, it was a fully formed best case scenario, for what that roster could have been. This is the exact opposite. We've seen 2 extremes in the first 2 years of Dennis's tenure. I don't know if we've seen anything that I would say is like the median, sort of product for what you would expect from a Dennis Gates team. And I think it makes it really hard in general, to I think come to a pretty reasonable conclusion about what this program is right now, because it's been just a whiplash effect for the last, 18 months here. And I think it's, right now that's coloring people's assessments of the program. And I don't think, I would have said this a year ago, I don't think it was right to base your judgments on Dennis's competence off one season where they go 25-10. And I'll say the same thing now. I don't think it's right to base your judgment off of his competence or his long-term ability off of what's, been a horrendous season this year. I think there have been some missteps, but there's been a lot of stuff that's just simply been out of their control. And how they've managed that, I have questions about, I should say. But I don't know how much at this point, we can really say is, malpractice versus just awful, awful luck. Untangling that's really, really hard. And I think it's going to be hard for the next month.
So last week was supposed to be the easiest week of the SEC conference schedule. Arkansas and Vanderbilt, when it comes to the SEC standings, are at the bottom. Not the very bottom, because that's where Missouri is currently occupied. Arkansas, for like 20 to 25 minutes, looked like, I think, the team that a lot of people expected Arkansas to be.
Yeah.
And then for the next 15 minutes proceeded to show you what they're actually what they actually are at this point, which they're a mess, but they're still very talented. They've got a lot of good athletes. They're capable of defending really well. And you've seen this in flashes all season long with them. But it was sort of like fitting to, that they, I guess, found their stride in Mizzou Arena. But, not long enough to really just make it a full-on blowout the entire game. And they let Missouri kind of creep back and make the final score respectable.
Yeah. I think the Arkansas game to me is sort of a good example of what happens to this team where, I look over the sub pattern after every game and, there's a pretty common theme that happens, in Missouri games, since Tonchi's been declared out, is Missouri does a good job playing well early, like they did against Vanderbilt, or at the very least, like treading water, for the first 6 to 8 minutes of the game. And then Missouri starts to go deep into the bench. And, you start to see what I would say are offensive suppressant lineups. You just put 2 or 3 guys on the floor that don't generate good offense for you. And this is a team that struggles to do that. So even if they're defending well, reasonably well, they don't have enough offense to really, get through. This team as a whole doesn't rebound well enough. So what you wind up with, or maybe they do a good job on first shot defense, but they give up an offensive rebound. This team fouls a lot. They do a good job for 25 seconds in a possession, and then someone commits a foul that either resets the shot clock or puts a guy on the line. This team comes down, they're running offense, but really only Tamar Bates and maybe Sean East are capable creators. And teams have figured that out now. Now they're just shrinking the floor, and it's hard for other guys to make plays. So you wind up with, Kurt Lewis shooting a 3. You wind up with Ant trying to drive for a pull-up. You wind up with Noah taking a guarded hook shot. The offense isn't there. And, again, that's what happened against Arkansas. They put 2 lineups out there that are not good offensively. For about 4 minutes, Arkansas opened the lead up to 13 points. Missouri got its starters back on the floor. It started whittling away. And then they put an offensive suppressant lineup back on the floor the last at the 3:53 mark, and Arkansas rips off an 8-0 run. And now it's a 17-point lead at the 17-point deficit at the break, and this team just can't come back. They're just not built that way. And then you add on to that, Arkansas was good at forcing turnovers. Missouri coughed the ball up a lot and just got bled out. So Missouri's offense miraculously shot the ball pretty well, but then it was coughing it up and not able to keep Arkansas off the glass. So it just gets into this pattern where there's just enough offense, just enough kind of continuity to keep things respectable. And then I think my critique of the staff is they get too deep into the bench. They are not acknowledging the reality that this team cannot go 8 or 9 deep. You cannot put some of these combinations together without incurring just a massive deficit offensively for a team that's struggling. Now, I understand you got to rest guys and you have to give guys breaks and you have to do that, but you basically have to be doing 1-for-1 swaps now. You can't be doing 2-3 swaps in some cases because you're just going to put your lineup in such a deficit. And even when Arkansas is playing poorly and trying to give you a way back in, like Missouri will have a lineup that maybe has like this: Nick Honor, they're down by 6, they're down by 16, they're cutting it down. And then you get to like Honor, Robinson, Carter, Majak are on the floor with Tamar Bates. Like, that's not, you're trimming the lead. You're getting it down close to single digits, and that's the lineup you wind up with on the floor, you're not going to come back from that. So I think that's, we talk about these games, but there's a recurring theme that was happening, where Missouri would play well for 30 minutes and then they kind of fall apart. Well, now there's been more attrition with, Pierce and Zeus going out of the lineup. It's gotten even more constricted for them. So now I think what you have to do if you're Missouri is you have to say, we can really only go one of like Majak, Robinson, Butler. We can't get too deep into the bench or else we're just going to be, too thin offensively. So that's not really like a concise way to look at the Arkansas game, but I think the Arkansas game shows you what's happening pretty routinely now and sort of what this, what a solution is here if they're willing to take it. But I'll let you weigh in now and in my stumping and in my lobbying here.
I'm not going to add a whole lot on the Arkansas game. I figure we could just, kind of clip each one
pretty quickly.
Yeah. I mean, and they go to Nashville and really started the way that you would want Missouri to start. They had, 20 points. It was 20-9 in the first 6.5 minutes. They would score 9 more points the rest of the first half, which left them in a deficit at halftime. And, it's kind of more to the point that you were making, like things were kind of churning and then running well. And then here come the lineups and, without,
these guys are playing hard and they're trying. We want to be very clear that they're doing what they can. They're just not executing consistently or with enough proficiency.
Well, yeah. And so I think that is kind of, the term that you were using was basically offensively challenged, offensive suppressant lineups. Yeah. And look, we've as a podcast that has, that made it through the entire Cuonzo Martin era, and then last year's offensive sort of explosion. We've seen our fair share of bad offenses, and at certain parts of the season, what guys are capable of doing what things, and at this point, yes, you do need to rest guys. I can see that Dennis Gates is probably frustrated by the fact that, he's been starting Jordan Butler and Butler went out and did not get a defensive rebound. I wrote about that in study hall, that the bigs all combined basically had one defensive rebound, and that was from Connor Vanover, who played 3 minutes. And, so there's also part of the frustration of the lineups is I get that, you're trying to kind of send a message that, Butler is a guy who has to get rebounds. But Mabor was not getting defensive rebounds either. He played a lot more minutes. He did get some offensive rebounds, and then Vanover basically comes in for 30 seconds and then gets put back on the bench and then comes back in for another couple minutes, when the game is mostly over. And if you're a team that's looking for offense, who is more likely to help you score? Is it Vanover or is it Majak? I mean, I know who the answer is for me. And, I realize there's a lot of fans who aren't huge Connor Vanover fans.
We're not debating best case options. We're debating least bad options.
And I feel like Watkins and I even talked about this last week. I get it. We've known who Connor Vanover is at this point. He's not a guy you want out hard hedging, 30 feet from the basket. He's not that guy. If you camp him around the basket, he can help you out. And they've done things to kind of keep him there. So, all right. I feel like I'm getting away, but essentially the offense goes in the tank and the only hope becomes whether Tamar and Sean can kind of cobble things enough together. And of course, Sean East had a bad night, and he kind of banged his knee early in the game.
Yeah.
He did come back, which was good news, but he wasn't especially efficient with the ball. I think Tamar probably had statistically his worst game in a while. With the efficiency metrics, he had 3 turnovers, but he was still like 7 of 13 from the floor.
Yeah, they're having to
like that should be enough. That should be enough. Like it's not none of this is on Tamar. It's on like the fact that he doesn't get any help. And credit to Noah, who actually made a few threes and had a really nice hot start.
I mean, the start was, I think they had 6 or 7 transition possessions in the first couple of minutes, and they'd only get like 8 or 9 the rest of the way. Vandy did a good job after the first media timeout of like really cleaning up its transition and secondary break defense and getting back and setting. I think they basically bailed out on the glass and, decided.
Still got 43% offensive rebounds.
Defensively they bailed to try and get back. The offensive rebound, we can get it down a rabbit hole on that. There's a reason why I think it got so bad in the second half. But Vandy gets the secondary break defense cleaned up. They start shrinking the floor. They've done what every team has done now, seemingly since, start of conference play, which is they know that Sean wants to get baseline every time. He rarely drives the middle gap or the slot gap in those empty side PNRs. You start sinking the defense his way. He can't get, good looks that way because there's 3 bodies at him. They've done a nice job understanding how to sit on Noah's preferred hook shot. They're okay, I think, willingly, kind of clogging things up in the middle of the floor for Tamar. He ran into a lot of issues, a lot of bodies in the middle gap because I think, Jerry Stackhouse has not done a good job, with rosters and injury, but he can still scout and can still see, hey, I'm willing to concede jumpers to keep the middle of the floor clogged for Tamar and see what they can do with it. If he's killing us in the middle of the floor, he's going to have to work for it. And Tamar, had his stretches, I think, where he was doing that. But, Missouri gets the lead to 20-9, and then I'm going to read off this. At 9:37, this is your lineup that is on the floor. Nick Honor, Anthony Robinson, Kurt Lewis, Aiden Shaw, Mabor Majak at 9:37. That lineup plays 46 seconds. We get to presumably the under 8, where we come back with Honor, Robinson, Lewis, Shaw, Butler for 146. At 7:05, we take out Nick Honor to presumably let him rest. What they've been doing is they've been, breaking up Nick and Sean a little bit more. So you get East, Robinson, Bates, Shaw, Carter. There's basically 3 or 4 minutes in there where you are taking a pillow and putting it on the face of your offense. And Mabor was not bad defense. I've rewatched the game. Some of these guys were not bad defensively, but you got to the offensive end and you can tell Vandy's there's 2 guys we got to worry about. Just clog up the middle of the floor, make it hard for them to get to their spots. And Missouri's going to take a 3. They're going to miss. We're going to clear. We're going to come down. We're going to run our stuff. Now, I know you have to use Kurt Lewis to rest Tamar Bates. Tamar Bates is still playing 30-plus minutes. I know you have to play Kurt. I know you have to play Ant Robinson because you got to get him minutes and get him ready for next year. And I know you still need to keep Aiden Shaw engaged. Do all of them need to be on the floor simultaneously together, though? You're chuckling, but I think that's a thing. That's managing the sub pattern to where I think what you can do is go, I've got to keep all these guys, give them their opportunities, and I've got to balance these things, but why all together? What's the theory of the case here? Because if the thought process is okay, we need shooting to keep space open. I think Kurt Lewis is now 6 of 30 on the year. Ant is struggling as a catch and shoot guy. So, okay, if our thought process is we need space to keep lanes open, that's fine. But okay, you don't have. Yeah, 6-29. Ant's not much better. Aiden doesn't shoot at all, and neither does Mabor. So people are going to say, like, Nick needs to stop driving into the trees. Well, if that's your lineup with those guys on the floor, Nick is your best offensive threat. And because the floor is shrunk, because nobody worries about those guys shooting, guess what he's going to have to do? Apply rim pressure into trees. Like, again, I realize Dennis is paid more than me. He knows far more about this game than I do, but like, there are lineups that I think where he's putting handcuffs on himself by trying to like play guys together, trying to, I think in some ways be like, we're deep, we can throw all these guys together. And man, there's enough possessions in lineup data to tell you these aren't working, and you really need to be careful, especially when you get a start like this on the road. Your team's playing with confidence, they're playing fast, they're being aggressive, they're getting their heads up, they're getting down the floor. You come out of a timeout, Vandy's starting to reset, and then that's the lineup you put out. Just ram, whatever large piece of, whatever large tool you want in the gears, because that's what you're doing. And they've been doing that for 3 or 4 games now. And like, all the schematic acumen and being good on the whiteboard is great. I think we can acknowledge that, but the coach's top job is what? To dictate what guys are on the floor? Like that's their number one job. Who's out here?
That is a key responsibility.
So, like, if you want to launch a defense for his philosophy and for his scheme, I get why people would say, well, look at who he puts out there in the middle of the half with his team, needing to, that's offensively starved at times, to just say, what we're going to do? We're just going to serve lima beans to you for 4 minutes on offense. It just doesn't work. And, I think they've got to, you sort of talked about this in your piece in Pour Over, which I agree with, is there's the team you want to be and the concept you have of yourself. And then there's a certain point of what you are. And I'm not sure if this, program right now quite acknowledges the reality of what they are right now. It's great to have this concept and this identity you've tried to forge, but the bodies aren't there to make that happen. You've got to live in reality. And right now, I just don't know, in some cases, especially in the middle of each half, that they're doing that. I think they're just making life a little bit harder for themselves when it doesn't have to be. Doesn't mean they're going to win games. Doesn't mean it's going to turn the tide. But man, they could, just by making some changes to the sub pattern, I think they can make life just a little bit more tolerable. I'm not going to say they're going to win games or they're going to turn it, but they could help just enough to maybe get their guys there.
Well, yeah. So they do have a couple home games coming up. They play Wednesday at 8 p.m. Against Texas A&M. We've already seen A&M. A&M is a not a great offensive team, but they certainly make your life hell on defense. I think they're capable of being a good offensive team. It's just they do not shoot the ball very well. And then Mississippi State, who has been a little bit of a disappointment so far this year. I think a lot of people like automatically,
I wouldn't. They're about what I thought they'd be. I'll say that.
Well, I should probably clarify for us or for. I mean, they're 3-6 in the league, and I mean they haven't really taken any bad losses, but I feel like they were the first team to kind of kickstarted South Carolina and their run. They did lose to Ole Miss. They're 3-6 in the league, and I mean things get a little easier for them in the next 3 games, so they can get back to 500. They've got Georgia at home. Georgia's been playing everybody pretty tough, and then you get Missouri on the road, and then Arkansas at home. So they certainly could kind of turn things around. I think for me, like where I've always thought they were going to be elite defensively. I don't think they've been as elite defensively. The offense has been a little better, but they also just got absolutely housed by Alabama the last time out. And I mean, I don't want to get this into like a Mississippi State preview because, they're still having a better season than Missouri is. But I think when you're kind of looking at this week, with two kind of offensively challenged teams kind of coming in, is this the week that you can kind of sneak a win?
I mean, you hope.
You hope. Yeah.
I mean, I feel like if you watch the first A&M game, it's going to be kind of a redux for the next 80 minutes. Mizzou tries to zone, dares teams to make jumpers. That's going to come with some trade-offs on the glass. Both these teams they're playing are exceptionally good at pounding you on the offensive glass, but feels like Missouri's going to dare them to beat that and try and see if they can't keep it tight on the glass. When they get rebounds,
if they're not going to worry about, what kind of offensive lineup they are going to put out, you just play Vanover, Majak, and Jordan Butler all together and just try to make the rim a little bit hellish. Maybe.
I don't know. At this point, what lineup haven't they tried? I think they're approaching 290 of them at this point. But they're going to do what they did, I think, a little bit against Vandy. They're going to try and get the ball out quick, push, see if they can't flatten out these defenses before they get set, and see if they can't pick some things off. Mississippi State's a little turnover prone. Maybe they can force Hubbard and Moore into some turnovers, and you can get some easy points that way. You hope the jump shooting is passable enough. I don't know if you need 40%, but you hope for 35 or 36%. You hope you can cherry pick a little bit on secondary breaks, and maybe the zone screws with these teams enough that you can, get to a situation where, again, Missouri's not playing a fast tempo right now to where you're in a game late and you can finally find a way to close it. I don't know if Mississippi State's I looked today, I think I had them at 4-5 right now, because I think I had them, picking off I think I had them maybe beating Mississippi or
probably picking South Carolina.
Yeah, probably. Yeah, it was South Carolina. I had them picking off South Carolina, but they're doing about what I thought. I think I had them at 8-10 overall. At least when I went through in the preseason, they're tracking towards what I thought they'd be. Josh Hubbard's been really, really good for them. I think, if he were playing on a contender, he'd probably be right in there for freshman of the year in the league. For them, he's been really, really good and efficient too. He's not just high volume. He's been really efficient at that high volume too. Tolu's come back and, Ben Tolu. I don't know if Tolu's better or worse. I mean, the numbers say he's about the same. Shaquille Moore is probably the closest thing they had to a floor spacer. DJ Jeffries is a black hole on offense for them. Cam Matthews does not do a lot of things, but he can cut, he can get on the glass, and he'll run the floor in transition, and maybe the bench will gin something up for him. But, I think something like 60% of their possessions in conference play are going to Hubbard or Tolu. What they're going to do. What Mississippi State's modus operandi is going to be. It's going to be Hubbard and some ball screens, punch it into Tolu, smother you to death on defense, hope that it's enough to just win a rock fight. Missouri's got to find a way to take one of Tolu or Josh away, I'd say zone, and just see if you can't make life hellish for Tolu inside. And if Josh Hubbard goes nuclear, so what? I mean, at least you're keeping the gaps close so he can't punish you off the dribble, and then you try and play on the break. Maybe they get a win. Maybe the home court advantage prevails for them. But if I sound dour, it's because I don't expect this to be a very.
It's not going to be a fun week.
It's not aesthetically pleasing.
Regardless of whatever happens, wins and losses. This is a brutal twosome. I
don't know why. You would give somebody Vandy, A&M, and Mississippi State in succession. That's cruel. That's
A&M is currently 48th in KenPom. I think they're still kind of projected by a lot of people to be in the NCAA tournament. That is a projected loss per KenPom of 4 points, 72-68. 30% chance to win, Matt. Mississippi State is 42nd. So I guess, we could say Texas A&M has been the more disappointing team. That is a projected loss of 5 points, 73-68, and a 33% chance to win. You know these teams as well as any. I would say as anyone who's not a current fan of either of those teams. Which do you think of those two games is a more likely dub?
Ooh, State.
Yeah,
I think A&M has not been great at times offensively, but they've got Taylor. Boots Radford can be a nice secondary scorer for them on the perimeter. Henry Coleman's, a really, really nice mobile big for them. Anderson Garcia has been doing some nice stuff off the ball, and they guard. I think they've just got, they aren't a team that's having to pump 60% of their possessions through two dudes. I think they've got enough stuff and enough, diversity in terms of offensive sources that they can make, Missouri, pay for even zoning them up a little bit. And we saw Boots, do some stuff in transition when he gets out. There's enough on the A&M roster that I think to get them over. I think if you took away one of the two guys for State, it gets really hard for them. So
in their last 6 games, Texas A&M, overtime win against Kentucky, a 1-point loss at Arkansas, a 4-point win at LSU, a 6-point win over Missouri, a 3-point loss to Ole Miss, and a 1-point loss to Florida. 1-point win over Florida. So, after kind of, not looking great against LSU in the first game of conference play, and then, going to Auburn is always a tough thing.
They're 4-2.
They're playing everybody tough. And the thing about Texas A&M being a little bit offensively challenged is they don't really break away from anybody. I also think the league is fairly balanced through the middle and the top. And so if this is a close game, do you trust Missouri to score the ball against Texas A&M's defense?
No.
Down the stretch. And I think that's why I agree with you that of the two, I would think Mississippi State is more likely. Because I think you can disrupt them more offensively, and they're not they're not as good on that end of the floor.
Yeah, if you were to look at a common opponent here, A&M beat Kentucky. State lost them by 13. Granted, one was on the road. State was at Kentucky, but I've lost twice to Alabama, lost Florida. I think if you were to look at teams that are quality teams in this league, A&M's played better against those teams. They've got a little bit more source of offense. I think if you got things late against Mississippi State, you could find a way to close it. The question is,
if Texas A&M had just defended against Arkansas in that last possession, they're 5-3 and probably although they have Tennessee on Saturday.
Right. But from having watched both teams and even looking at the results and knowing, even look at the metrics, it's wrong to sort of I think speak with any confidence about Missouri getting a win at this point until they get a win. But State would be the one I would take for them this week.
Look at this next series of games for Texas A&M. This is actually pretty funny. Wednesday, Missouri, 125th in KenPom. Saturday, Tennessee, 6th in KenPom. The following Tuesday, Vanderbilt, 186th in KenPom. The following Saturday, Alabama, 7th in KenPom. The next Tuesday, Arkansas, 116th in KenPom. And then the following Saturday, Tennessee again, 6th in KenPom. So 125, 6, 186, 7, 116, 6.
I'm seeing 7 and 7 here. I'm seeing.
That's some scheduling.
I thought the back end of their schedule was going to be kind of where it came down for them because they were going to get South Carolina at home. They were going to get Georgia on the road. Then they get the Mississippi schools. Like, I thought that was going to be sort of the make or break sort of last 2 weeks for A&M, in the conference. It looks like it's still going to be that way for them. Maybe not for a conference title, but maybe like if they can, find a way to handle, their business. Tennessee has, looked vulnerable at times. If you picked off, they go 4-2 over the next 3 weeks and they're 8-6, with 4 games to go against nobody ranked higher than 40th in KenPom. There's a chance for them to make a push to get into the top 4, I think. If A&M can, find a way to steal a win and handle its business everywhere else, I think they can position themselves for a strong close. As for Missouri, again,
weird.
As for Missouri, man, I'll reiterate what I said earlier. Manage it so that you can still get quality minutes for your young guys. I mean, that's really where we are. Is, can you keep, spirits at a place that are healthy? Can you find a way to get them productive minutes, that really, I think, give you a good gauge as to where they are? And hopefully, if you're Missouri, you can steal a win, at home against like a Mississippi State. Maybe you go to Arkansas and you feel like you can get a win there. I mean, if Arkansas, I don't know where that team's going to be psychologically at that point. You do get, I think the best other opportunities outside of that are maybe a home game against Ole Miss and maybe a trip to LSU. If you're Missouri, if you can just get one, I think, and rip the Band-Aid off and get, the bad vibes away from there, can you find a way to pick up 2 or 3 more down the stretch? You're headed to Wednesday in Nashville. There's nothing else to play for other than pride at this point. But right now, I think that this team just needs to see a result. There's nothing more that really needs to be said about them at this point.
And we've still got another month and a half of this.
Time to start scouting portal pickups.
Yeah. We are already doing that. That's going to be it for us.
Yeah.
There's two more basketball games this week. Hopefully Missouri can get one of them. I just at this point, I'm just ready to see a different result. It would be really, really nice. I'm also toying with the idea of going to see my friend Mark in Florida, getting out of town for just so I could and make sure that at least one of those games is when we're traveling. So I will be on a beach when Missouri is playing basketball. Just be I don't.
Just lay over in Gainesville on Wednesday, February 28th, and take Mark to the O-Dome. And
no, we're not going to see college basketball. Okay, so we're going to get out of here. I've got the link up on the page now, 573tees.com/collection/rockm if you want any football t-shirts. We've got some stuff kind of cooking for off-season content. I'm anticipating some kind of fun announcements, coming your way probably early March, for new and interesting ways to kind of get your Rock M radio fix, featuring Matthew J. Harris, everybody. No, but we'll be back next week. Maybe it's with Watkins and myself, but we're going to keep talking about this team no matter what happens. And then with eyes focused on what's in the future in March and April, when we are blessed with the transfer portal and the glimmer of hope of fixing things in one off season. But for now, we're gonna get out of here. Thanks for everybody for tuning in. Appreciate it. If you are not subscribed, please subscribe to this, and you'll get the rest of the the fun Rock and Radio content beamed directly into your mobile device. Thanks for tuning in, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, everyone, for tuning in to Rock M Radio, a proud partner of Fans First Sports Network. If you enjoyed this episode and would like to see more just like it beamed directly into your personal device, just click the subscribe button below. Beep. And you can find this podcast through the Apple Podcast app or for iPhone, or the Google Podcast app for Android, or whatever app you use to listen to your podcast. We are also available on Spotify. Just search for Rock M Radio. And if you like other sports, Fans First Sports Network is a podcast network that has coverage of all other teams, Major League Baseball, MLS, NFL, whatever you want to listen and read about. It is a great network full of really fantastic podcasts. So look them up and subscribe to any and all of those podcasts. Rock M Radio will be back with more episodes coming soon. Thanks.